In part 1 of this series, you have learned to measure and cut out the black and yellow squares of the quarantine flag. Now you will continue by cutting out the rectangle of white fabric and learning the basics of hand sewing.
So this rectangle is going to be 2 lengths, basically 2 squares, but it's going to be half this size because we don't need it to be super long when we hang the large when we hang the flag. So that's the length of 1 square. Now we're gonna go up and measure the length of 2 squares. And because we want it to be the same on both sides, we measured half of the square. Actual. So let's see. Funny enough, this is actually pretty much the size we want. And you might have seen I kind of messed up here because this was folded over, but you want it to be a straight rectangle such as this. And then same as with the yellow and black squares, you want to cut that rectangle out. And we have our squares. So let's get to the fun part. So if you remember from the photograph or the graphic, the flag is laid out like this. Yellow, black, yellow, black, and then on the other side it looks the same. So the first thing that we're going to do is that for each yellow, we're going to sew it to a black. For each black, we're going to sew it to a yellow. So we're going to sew all these pairs of squares to each other. Let's start with square 1. How do you sew? Hopefully you have a little bit of experience, but if you have none at all, you take this needle. This needle has a hole in it. You take your thread. You might need to cut off the end to make it a little bit more pointy. But the thread goes inside this little hole in the needle. Pull it through. And depending on how long you want your thread, I'm going to say that this for now is enough for me. I'm going to have to rethread a little bit later, but I don't want it to get caught up in any knots. So cut off the end, and then I'm going to tie a knot, actually several knots, onto the end so that this part cannot go through the cloth.
Now that you have all your fabric pieces cut and know how to thread a needle, stay tuned for part 3 to learn how the flag is assembled.